Ritzy, do you renounce Satan?
I can renounce him.
I recently watched The Godfather for the first time ever. Crazy, right? Alleged video essayist, yet never has seen The Godfather. It's widely considered to be one of the best movies of all time, and some go so far as to deem it perfect. Perfect is a strong word to live up to. So going into my first watch, I was actually a little skeptical that it could live up to its reputation. Between you and me, I honestly expected a slow-burning snooze fest. So what did I think after watching it? Well, just a week later, I watched it again for the second time ever. Because, believe it or not, The Godfather really is that good. Turns out that when everyone and their mother considers a movie to be great, they're probably right. But even without knowing what other people thought of The Godfather, I think I could have watched it just that one time and predicted it would be revered as an all-time great. The question is, how could I tell? The answer lies in the baptism scene, but it's not helpful for me to just say it was a really cool scene, so I have some ideas I want to share first that will hopefully give a more concrete explanation as to why I think The Godfather is essentially perfect, and what writers can learn in hopes of chasing perfection themselves. For a while now, I've had a theory on what makes a story good, bad, or even perfect. It tries to explain specifically what a story does right, and how right it does it. The Godfather perfectly adhered to the ideas in the theory. It possessed all of the traits of a perfect movie. I mentally ran it again, this time with the TV series Breaking Bad, and again it worked. It helps explain why Breaking Bad is in that elite echelon of television series. Again and again, all of those movies and series that fall in the Story Hall of Fame were passing with flying colors. These all-time greats each have something in common, and this theory might just know exactly what. And honestly, it's not rocket science. I'm calling it the ceiling principle. The ceiling principle sounds cool and hopefully makes me seem smart, but in reality, it's a super simple idea of basic addition and subtraction. It takes two factors into consideration: remarkability and believability, a positive and a negative. Together, they form the ceiling of a story's potential. Firstly, we have remarkability. Remarkability is why we like things. It has super broad coverage. Star Wars has remarkable world building. Always Sunny in Philadelphia is remarkably funny. Fargo has remarkable cinematography. Interstellar has a remarkable soundtrack. And Coco has a remarkable message. There's plenty more remarkable things about all these stories, but the point is that remarkability comes in all shapes and sizes. Anything unique or clever or interesting or exciting or memorable will fall under this category, and what they each do is raise the ceiling. The other factor is believability. How well can it immerse the audience without snapping them out of the story? Believability is maintained through a few different areas of a story. First and foremost is internal logic. Do things seem to follow a natural flow, or do the writers make things magically convenient instead? Things like exposition would fall here. The other two dimensions that dictate believability are acting and dialogue. The fastest way to remind the audience that they are in fact watching something is by having an unbelievable acting performance or an unnatural line of dialogue.
How much is it?
It'll be $18.
Here you go. Keep the change. Hi, doggy.
You're my favorite customer.
They stick out like a sore thumb. To some people, believability might seem like a nitpicky demand. I disagree. I think that believability is incredibly important because it helps support the illusion of story and transforms it into something very real. A more believable story is infinitely more powerful than one that breaks its own logic. On that same note, believability is not quite realism. Realism is adhering to actual real-world physics, whereas believability is just being consistent within story rules. The Force isn't realistic, but in the confines of a story, it's entirely believable. As long as it follows the established rules, that is. In short, anytime a story bends in an unnatural way, or breaks its own rules, or just doesn't add up, it hurts the believability and lowers the ceiling. Regarding the two variables, I wouldn't say one is more important than the other. The most remarkable story, packed with spectacular ideas and stunning visuals, could be spoiled by sloppy internal logic. The most believable story, with an airtight script, would be plain boring if nothing interesting happens. Together, remarkability and believability push and pull, ultimately determining the ceiling of a story's potential. If you're new to my channel, you'll come to learn I love making charts to visualize my ideas. Here's a simple graph I made with the x-axis as believability and the y-axis as remarkability. It's an easy way to see how good a story is and why. The fact of the matter is, most series we see on TV or movies we see in theaters are at least in some capacity kind of good. If any were truly that bad, they probably wouldn't get the green light for funding. This means that if I were to break up this graph into 4 distinct quadrants, like my aesthetic urges wish I could do, it wouldn't be distributed very evenly. So rather than breaking it into nice even quadrants, I think what we can do is find little pockets that share distinct qualities. This video is about chasing perfection, so the star is going to be in the top right. Before we get to that, however, I'm first going to rapid fire some of the less significant areas to help show the chart in action. Down in the bottom left is No Man's Land. Unremarkable and unbelievable. A story like this would be so bad that I don't think one actually exists. To give you an idea of what it would look like, I'll paint you a picture of the closest thing I have to an example. In this story, nothing out of the ordinary happens. In fact, it's so boring that it's actually painful to even sit through. However, it's somehow also unbelievable. None of the dialogue makes sense, everyone acts strange, and there's no real point to the story. What I've just described is an office job. What No Man's Land teaches us is that for a story to even exist, it has to at least have some plot and some logic. Close to No Man's Land is a pocket I would call the Hallmark Zone. These are notoriously bad stories which are actually fun to watch as a means to point and laugh at. For an example, I'll pick a movie called The Mistletones. In terms of remarkability, there's really little going for it. Its plot is painfully generic. Jolly girl gets grumpy guy to learn the meaning of Christmas, and they fall in love, the end. For believability, like all stories in this zone, it's laughably bad. The acting is a step above a school play, the dialogue is bizarre, and the whole thing is just painfully corny. What the Hallmark Zone teaches us is that it's barely passable to just have a plot that follows basic rules. Right above the Hallmark Zone is the forgettable blockbuster. Fun, but entirely unserious. For an example, I'll use San Andreas. In terms of remarkability, San Andreas has a kinda cool, kinda cliche premise. The world is getting ripped to shreds by super earthquakes and tsunamis, and The Rock wants to save his family and some British kids. It's packed with chaotic action, and is honestly a fun watch. However, it has paper-thin believability. All of the chaos very conveniently wraps around the characters in a way that only Hollywood could achieve, which leaves you more confused than captivated. If you're 13 years old though, this movie rocks. See what I did there? Anyway, what a forgettable blockbuster teaches us is that to be a memorable story that people cherish over time, it's not enough to just have cool and exciting moments. Writers need to commit to logic and give the story respect it deserves. The last pocket I'll show is the Insisters. This is a pocket named after what Peter Griffin considers the Godfather to be.
It insists upon itself, Lois.
What?
It insists upon itself.
What does that even mean?
A slow burn that leans on its message and acting rather than a remarkable plot. Don't worry, I'm not actually putting The Godfather here, but I do have an example that might be a hot take. I'm gonna put Eyes Wide Shut here, Stanley Kubrick's final film. This movie had fantastic believability with consistent logic, great performances, and natural dialogue. It also had pretty remarkable cinematography, a cool premise around cults, and a strong message about monogamy. But oh my god, was this movie boring for me. I'd give a spoiler warning, but there's nothing to spoil, nothing ever happens. Outside of the technical traits and its message, I couldn't think of anything remarkable enough to raise its ceiling. Don't get me wrong, this movie was solid, but I'm putting it in the Insisters because there's just not enough fuel in this movie's fire. What Insisters teach us is that no matter how well a story is executed, the ceiling is capped by its remarkability or lack thereof. By now, I bet you have a strong grasp of this chart and have probably thought of your own pockets as well, so I'd love to hear any ideas in the comments. But for now, we have a job to do. Let's circle in on the top right where the universally beloved stories lie. Let's talk about the pursuit of perfection. Let's talk about The Godfather. I mentioned at the start that I fully expected The Godfather to be a slow-burning snooze fest. Good acting, profound message, innovative cinematography, but a whole lot of insisting. I actually trusted the opinion of Peter Griffin over the bajillions of people who all swear by it, and boy was I wrong. What sort of went without saying was the believability. I knew just by its perception that it would be good in this metric, but I didn't really consider how good. When defining believability, I said it's subtractive. Every time a story fails on this front, it lowers the ceiling. The Godfather is essentially flawless. The logic, the dialogue, and the performances all were excellent to the point where I never felt like I was watching a movie. The believability never once lowered the ceiling, which is great, but by now we know that believability is only half the battle. What's the point in being believable if nothing remarkable happens? Well, what ultimately made me realize that this movie is an all-time great is the insane level of remarkability. For a nearly 3-hour runtime, The Godfather finds a way to make it feel more like a blink. They pack so many iconic moments into this movie, from the horse head in the bed, to shooting the titular character, to Michael's toilet stunt, to the car bomb, all the way until the very last moment. This movie is an absolute roller coaster. There really never was a dull moment. What's equally impressive is the timelessness. When considering remarkability, I try to take context into account. This means older movies and shows have a sort of first mover advantage. I give them extra credit for doing things before anyone else was. So with The Godfather, I was going to be a little lenient on the action scenes and not hold it to the same standards as a movie that comes out today. But I didn't have to. The Godfather was so remarkable that if it did come out today, people would be just as impressed. So The Godfather excelled in both remarkability and believability, and I think that's exactly why it's such a perfect movie. But if it's that simple, why aren't more writers applying these two factors to their stories? Why is the Hall of Fame still so select? I can think of two barriers of entry. First reason is because it's really hard. Remarkability and believability naturally work against each other. The more cool stuff you pack into a story, the harder it becomes to rationalize it all in a logical way. Take Harry Potter for example, movies and books alike. Harry Potter is a fantastically remarkable story filled with so many memorable moments, but even its most die-hard fans can recognize that it's riddled with logical issues. A rewatch of the series requires just letting stuff slide for the sake of the fun. Even though it's beloved, nobody considers Harry Potter to be perfect. Nobody holds it in the same breath as The Godfather, which is okay, but again, we're talking about perfection here. Grappling with this challenging relationship between remarkability and believability is the first barrier of entry that helps separate those perfect stories from the rest. The other reason stories are left out of the Hall of Fame is an issue of subjectivity. Like The Godfather teaches us, the best stories are wholly believable and maximally remarkable. Believability can vary from person to person, but for the most part, it's easy to grade objectively. Did you or did you not feel immersed? With any story, you can actually tally every time it feels unbelievable. If that tally's close to 0, you have yourself a wholly believable story. But what does it mean to be maximally remarkable? Remarkability is an indisputably subjective trait. Sure, something can make you feel impressed, but it's hard to actualize how impressed you are in a concrete way. So how can a writer strive for maximum remarkability when there isn't even a clear objective? We talked about how remarkability comes in many shapes and sizes. One dimension I haven't really touched is purpose. Purpose is something I preach a lot on this channel. I consider a story's purpose to be the primary reason it's told. This can be the message it's trying to get across, the feeling it's trying to invoke, or even just the dollar it's trying to earn. Every story has a purpose. Some are just much more remarkable than others. To have a shot at getting into the Hall of Fame and creating a perfect story, it needs to have a Hall of Fame purpose. So the most important question to ask when striving for maximum remarkability is, will the audience walk out of the theater feeling changed? If The Godfather were cut early before the baptism scene, it would have been a fantastic movie, but nobody would ever think to call it perfect. Even with all of those other thrilling moments that were grounded in an airtight script, I think it would have fallen short in the remarkability side of things because it would have fallen short on purpose. The baptism scene is remarkable in its own right. If you had just walked into the theaters when this scene started, you would agree that on the surface it's a super cool moment. However, with the context of the rest of the movie in mind, the baptism scene does something so remarkable that it solidified The Godfather as perfect. Everything building up to this moment was exciting mafia drama and action. But the purpose of The Godfather is not to simply entertain the audience with exciting mafia drama and action. The purpose of The Godfather is to explore the tug of war between morality and power. And the baptism scene ties it all together perfectly. It interweaves the two sides of Michael in a brilliant and profound way. While he's at his godson's baptism, his men are all at work on his orders. While he's asked to renounce Satan, his men are all murdering the leaders of the other families. While he becomes his godson's godfather, he's also becoming the new mafia godfather. All movie long, we've seen a respected moral man slowly get roped into evil, and the baptism scene is the final nail in the coffin to his character. Every iconic moment was great, but delivering that narrative message gives The Godfather that final push to maximum remarkability, solidifying The Godfather as perfect. The main takeaway from this video is that to be one of the greats, a story must rise to the challenge of blending remarkability with believability, and do so with a profound guiding purpose. It's not supposed to be easy, but the result is perfection. Before you go, I just want to show you this meme a friend sent me about video essayists that I think is way too true. A lot of channels on YouTube just summarize movie plots and call it a video essay, but on my channel I always strive to do more. I try to bring my own unique ideas to help spark a conversation about my favorite shows and movies. I always try to be remarkable. If that's a difference you can appreciate, consider subscribing. It's the best way to support me, and I'm grateful for every single one of you. I want to open the floor to you all now to leave any and every comment that's on your mind. Do you agree with the ceiling principle? Does your favorite story support it? Or is there something I'm completely missing? I think talking about this stuff is just as fun as watching it, so don't be shy in the comments. Okay, that's all I have to say. The video is now over. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Bye.